All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this special webinar. All relationships are eternal is how we called the webinar. And for this webinar, I've got my friend and special guest, Grace Kelly. And maybe we start with a bit of an intro, and then and even a bit of context and how we got here and how we got to doing this together.
Yeah, that'd be lovely. Yeah. Do you want to start?
Sure. So many of you know me from my Facebook group, Ask and It Is Given. And if you're not on the Facebook group, I invite you to join there. But and so many of you know me from there and other areas. And Grace and I, so I'm an executive coach, and that's mostly what I do. And then the areas that you know me from maybe have been around, besides coaching, I also have a lot of interest in several spiritual teachings. So the three principles being one of them, and the teachings of Abraham Hicks being another. And so I love exploring this other side of our life, like more than just this physical side. And Grace and I, I'll give maybe we'll give the context after you introduce a bit about you. Yeah. Why don't you?
Well, okay. Yeah, sure. So lovely to be here, everybody. I'm currently here in Italy. I'm in my mother-in-law's home. So if Italians walk in or my dogs might come barging in, please don't be disturbed. I've kind of gotten used to meditating around noise and doing interviews and coaching calls with family in the background. And the reason for that being is my partner, Francesco, passed away in December, very suddenly, and I've been living with his family ever since. And I work as a coach myself, and very interested in the bigger dimension to life. Even more so now, having had the experience of losing the love of my life, even more interested in our eternal nature and seeing the evidence of that love. And so in my connections with Dominic, whilst Dominic and I both run coaching practices, and we will mastermind back and forth on the business side of things, our conversations have tended to go deeper than that. And really we've seen the beauty and the richness of what's available when we're coming from a place of love and coming from a place of service. So we wanted to bring more of that conversation to you today, just that eternal nature that we are, and why that's important in a relationship, in a business, in your day-to-day life. So that's a bit about me.
Yeah. Well, Grace and I met in 2016, and we were both doing Michael Neal's coaching academy. So we're both grounded in the three principles. And that's how we met. And I'm Italian, but I live in Canada. I'm in Toronto. And so Grace and I met, and we met, I guess, first in LA, because that's the first time we met. And then we got to know each other over the almost 1 year of the coaching. And it was in LA, it was in New York, in London. We had lots of fun as we would spend time between the training and then dinners and those types of things that we were doing. Well, it'll be going on 2 years, but Grace and I began conversations in mastermind weekly mastermind conversations that we would have. And in fact, I would say that the group, Ask and It Is Given, the Facebook group, is actually, Grace is quite responsible for that. So just in our conversations, that arose as a creation, as something that I sought to create. And actually that whole path of my business arose really as a contribution from my conversations with Grace. But in December, so a few months ago, suddenly Francesco, who was Grace's, had been in relationship with, and her fiance, and they'd been together for 14 years. And when he passed away, our conversations, which we were having on a weekly basis, just went into a whole other realm. As we were talking about what was going on. And then Grace, in her writing, if those of you who are familiar with her writing, I mean, it's just such a gift. And so at a time when she could have sort of gone into isolation, because I'm not sure, if anything like that happened to me, where I would have gone, but she could have gone into isolation. But what I saw Grace do, both with me and then in through her writing, is just a sharing and an expression around what she was seeing and what was going on. I was getting off these calls that she and I were having, and sometimes I'd be in tears, and I'd go talk to my family about, some of what incredible things that were being shared. And then I said to Grace, you have to share this in the group. And so I'd invited her to come into Ask and It Is Given and to be sharing her writing in the group, because what was happening was just amazing to me. And because of who Grace is, her ability to perceive that all relationships are eternal. Abraham Hicks says, every relation is eternal. None of us are going anywhere. and so, that sounded good to me in theory, but Grace had an actual experience of what that means. And so we've been in those types of conversations for a while, and we decided a while ago to say, we've got to open this up. And so just so you know, all you 37, 38, however many are here, so you are now in our regular weekly spot when Grace and I usually connect. It's actually at this time every Monday for our conversations. So thank you for joining us.
I love that, Dominic. We're masterminding all together today, by the signs of it. Sounds great. Just to pick up on what you were sharing as well about, knowing things in theory versus experience. I really wanted to share that. I think I knew love in theory until Francesco died, and the experience of love just really deepened and went from something I was trying to grasp to something that I was actually experiencing. And how on earth we end up experiencing such a deep level of love in the midst of death, I can't explain that. So for me, there is that importance, as you were saying, Dominic, about going from theory and learning things and absorbing things to actually embodying and experiencing that. And something lit up in me about the fact that we can fall in love the moment we fall out of our insecure narrative. I walked into the room to find my fiance gone. And yet a feeling of deep love swept over me as all of the judgmental, worried, indecisive, resistant noise in my head that I'd been living in fell away. And so today we really want to talk a little bit more deeply about falling back in love, because certainly in our conversations, as I've been sharing with Dominic, it is possible, and it can happen in an instant. It's not something that needs worked on. It's not something that even requires your partner to be living, or your job to be amazing, or your body to be the perfect size. It is our eternal nature. It is that part of us, that whole part of us, that experiences love as that noise, as that resistance falls away. So where do you want to go from here, Dominic? Because I would talk about that for 2 hours.
And what we were planning was that we would just speak for a little bit to this, and then open up. We'd love to engage with you and your own questions. So if that works, right? That's sort of what we were thinking. Yeah. On that, what Grace was just talking about, the part with resistance, and those of you who have been on, other webinars that we've done, that everything that is resistance to love is always thought. So it's always thought. It's always something that shows up in your head, and it's a story and a narrative. And so it's out of the thinking that could ever block what was there. And I know that that what would be there all the time is a sort of an awareness of that love, passion, interest about, and it isn't only about relationships. As Grace said, as we've been exploring this, it is about that feeling of love and aliveness within you. And relationships for sure is an area, but also it shows up everywhere. It shows up in our work, your career, a business, if you have a business, your living situation, your body, it's all of that. It's what's the sense of that aliveness. And the only thing that can ever interfere with that is thought. So some thought made more important than love in your own mind, right? And so, and it's engaging with that creates that sort of resistance and diminishment of what's always there underneath it.
Yeah. And and so human of us, Dominic, that I'd been living in that judgmental narrative for weeks prior to Francesca's death. I'd been not being aware of it, but kind of just in that habit, in that habit of thought, and therefore getting caught up again. And so I really began to see that this judgmental narrative, this how am I doing narrative, this, kind of like a narrative of blame and judgment had been going on. And unfortunately, what that also did was it had shown up in my relationship at different times. And the old me would listen to it a lot and pay attention to it a lot. And eventually, the best my wisdom could come up with from that state was, oh, I think that we should break up. Because, this isn't really going well. And I didn't know back then, innocently, that I was living resistant, that I was living in habits of thought that was very critical. And therefore, it was having an impact on the relationship. So it kept looking like a good idea to me to leave my relationship or get away from my relationship or change my job. Or, one time I remember being in a hotel, a fabulous hotel in Beverly Hills, and I had to change room 3 times because I really thought that the problem was the room. And this is how innocent, and Francesco, God bless him, just went along with, oh God, we have to change room, anything to make me happy. But this is this insanity that we live in when we don't realize we're in a habit of thinking that's not helpful, impacts so many areas. And for me, for many years, it impacted my relationship. Now, something really interesting happened in that waking up to the place I was operating from, or let's say starting to get a feel for what was insecure thinking versus what was truly love, helped me personally to stop making decisions about my relationship in a low mood. That was huge. That meant in the last 5 years of Francesco's living life, our relationship was the best it had ever been. Falling back in love was something that we got to do every single day. And falling out of taking things personal and making it very serious just became the natural way of things. All resistance began to diminish, and what was left was love. Now, that's now at a new level, if it's okay with me to share that, Dominic. With Francesco not being here in physical form, there's zero resistance going on. There's zero narrative on my part, and I'm sure on his part, whereby the connection, and sometimes I'm afraid to say it, but I'm going to say it, is getting richer and richer and richer. And I simply can't explain that. But boy, do I wish I hadn't missed it so much when he was alive. But it's our innocent human misuse of thinking can get us into all sorts of trouble with human beings and ourselves. And yet what's left when we're not operating from there is just a falling back in love.
Mm. Yeah, this has been so powerful in the realization of what's happened since, and in our sharing how it's so clear that we never go anywhere, and it's been such a privilege to hear about how this relationship has evolved and really expanded. As Grace said, there's no resistance in the relationship, because usually in a relationship, both sides have their thing, right? So both sides would have their, thoughts of resistance and all the doubt, worry, anxiety, impatience, all the kind of thing that gets in the way. And now that's not there for sure on the one side, right? And so and Grace, it would be cool. Many people probably have read your writing and some of those stories, but I think it's astonishing, some of how do you know that the relationship is still there? How do you know Francesco is still there?
Mm-hmm. Well, what I noticed is there was just a very strong yearning to connect. And I would simply ask for signs. I find myself on the beach one day, sort of closing my eyes and saying, you know, if you're here, just validate it. Just show me something tangible, something I can see with my eyes. And I just heard, look to the left. And I looked over and I'd never seen it before. I'd walked that beach many, many times. There were a ton of fish jumping out of the water. I called them my dancing fish. Suddenly they were just jumping up and out and up and out, and I was brought to tears to see something like that. And a very funny one that happened just last week was, again, this yearning to connect. And I guess it does come from that contrast that I think you would talk about, Dominic, you know, the sense of the loss making me ask for connection. And I'm walking along and I'm realizing, you know, you just need to ask, Grace. You know, he's with you. Just need to ask. And I kind of in that moment said, all right, babe, spring forth into my life. And in that moment, I kid you not, you may have read this, a cricket hit me on the left shoulder. And I can't think of any other animal that could spring forth than that. And it kind of just woke me up out of my dream state, this illusion that we're separated, this illusion that our eternal nature somehow can't get through to us. And more recently, what I've started doing is in my meditation is having conversations with Fran. Forget conversations with God. I'm getting some really good stuff with conversations with Fran. And one of the things that I've really noticed is it's when I hear things that I wouldn't necessarily think myself, then I know it's him. Not things he would have said in his day-to-day life here, but rather things that come forth that I couldn't have made that up. And so, I mean, I have a whole book, Dominic, as you know, a whole book on evidence, because for me, I didn't realize I was someone who needed proof and tangible. I need to see the tangible. And I have a whole book that I'm collecting with all of that. Now, you know, that might sound woo-woo to some of you. That might sound, well, those fish could have just been jumping, or, well, that cricket might have just made a mistake, or, you know, but you also know by a feeling. And it's just the feeling of connection and the feeling of love that has emerged and that has carried me through, is carrying me through my grief, which is why I can show up here and talk. And I haven't needed to isolate. I haven't been able to put my pen down because there was just an opening that started to flow. And I think, Dominic, that opening has also come from just resistance gone. Mm-hmm. It's so clear to me now that whether we're living in resistant thinking about our jobs or our partners or our bodies, there's no room there for something fresh. We need to make room for something fresh to come through. And it's not so much physical space or time as the world seems to think that that's what's important. It's more dropping out of that resistant narrative. We become wide open to creative solutions, ideas, direction, opportunity. But most of all, we drop back into love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I really had also in the experiences in our conversations, I got my own experience of this where Grace would, it was both in our conversations as well as sometimes in Messenger, where Grace would send me a question or some voice message or something. And it was interesting because there were things that happened in those conversations where I would say and respond things, and it was so clear to me, like, okay, that wasn't me. It was she. I mean, you know, one of the things you might know as I'm a real stickler for coaching, like pure coaching, and coaching, you know, works a certain way. There's no advice in coaching, none of that. Well, Grace would sometimes ask me questions, and I'd say, well, this is it, right? And I'd surprise myself with like either telling her which way it was or what she should do, because I don't do that, right? But I found myself telling her, and then I said, that wasn't me. That wasn't me who just gave you that answer. So it was an amazing kind of experience to be in those kinds of conversations, and to experience that like something else was happening. And I mean, I never met Francesco, but I really feel like I know him. And I really love his sense of humor. He's hilarious. He's really, really funny. And now Abraham says that, you know, Grace has shared several stories, you know, with the dogs and the cricket, and there was a pheasant. There was all kinds of stuff going on, different things. And Abraham has said that, you know, again, once it's into non-physical, the resistance isn't there, but oftentimes non-physical will communicate with you through animals specifically. Animals are very non-resistant, and things like birds are abundant. Insects are pretty abundant, but birds often are. And so if you ever see birds doing funny things, like all of a sudden landing somewhere, or, you know, positioning themselves in a certain way, it's good to get curious about that, especially if you've been thinking of someone, or if you've been wondering about something. I have, my dad passed away years ago. It's been more than 10 years, and he had dementia. And so, but you know, my niece was one of his grandchildren who he was very close with, has for about 3 years now, in her bedroom, every spring, there is a bird and it comes knocking on the window, and it just does not behave the way any bird would behave. It's unusual. It keeps coming back. It's positioned in such a way. And so I was talking, when she shared that with me, I said to her, hey, and it was interesting because I said to her, well, do you know who that is? And she knew right away. She said, yeah, I know who that is. So,
yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's no surprise that he would use, Francesco would use animals. He was like a total animal lover, you know. But I just wanted to talk a little bit also about that falling back in love aspect, in human form as well, because, you know, as I mentioned earlier, you know, our relationship wasn't particularly smooth initially. And as I said, that left me, as I listened to that narrative of resistance, it left me thinking it was a good idea to just leave the relationship. And so what that taught me over time was, oh, excuse me, someone's just decided to phone. What that taught me over time was, that falling back in love was possible, because what would happen is that as I got a little bit of time away from the relationship, my judgmental, blameful, hesitant narrative would shut up. And then I would reach out to Francesco, or he would reach out to me, and I would then think to myself, what am I doing? The feeling of love would be back, and we'd get back together. Now, he was conscious enough as a man, thankfully, to not take it personal. I know a lot of people that wouldn't put up with that behavior. But I remember he said to me at one point, I know you need to leave because I know your mind gets really busy. But I just want you to know, even if you have to keep leaving for the rest of our relationship, I'll be here for when you get back, because you do know there's love here, don't you? And something about his lack of resistance and lack of taking it personal made me just go, oh, I can just be myself. I can be a total bloody mess if I need to be. And I'm not saying your partner needs to have that level of awareness, but I'm saying, we make really bad decisions about our jobs, about our relationships, about ourselves, when our minds get really, really busy. When we fall into a low mood. And I probably would have saved myself a number of years of that dynamic and had an even more loving experience the whole time if I had understood how I was using my thinking against my relationship and myself. And today you might not be in a relationship where you're doing that or whatever, but you might be innocently caught in resistance about your job or your body or your finances. The subject doesn't really matter. What matters is, are you paying so much attention to the noise in your head that your experience of life is anything but love?
Yeah, I love the clarity in that, Grace. It's for me, when I really noticed that, how I went through a job loss where there was a restructuring, and this years ago where I went through this, and then I was in a place where I decided I was going to start my own business. And as it was starting, what I saw is how much I would be at home. I'd be, I began getting clients and stuff, doing work. And then I would notice that I would be free, like have free time. And all of a sudden it would be like, I watched it in my head turn into, well, see, this means you're not doing well. It was like the fact that, I had clients, I was starting, it was going well, but then there was free time turned into, see, this means you're not doing well. This is bad. And it was interesting how, as I projected forward, thinking about, I want to get to a place where I'm living, this kind of balanced life where my work is a vocation and all of that. And it came to me that what I wanted was a life like what I was starting to live. But so it was starting to create this life that I loved, except the way this life that I loved was shaping up, there was all this noise about the parts where I could just sit and read, because that was an example or pointing to a failure in my mind. It was like, well, if you were really successful here or really good at this, you wouldn't have this free time. You wouldn't be sitting around doing this. So I couldn't see, and that was an interesting thing to kind of wake up to, that how great life was, how great my life was, how great everything was going, other than this thinking that would pop in and out and make me feel miserable or anxious or worried.
Yeah. And it's these habits of thought that, we just don't realize how much we're living by habits of thinking that aren't helpful. Like a bit like what you were saying there, Dominic, one of my habits was, as soon as there was a problem in the relationship, to then go, we're not supposed to be together. To automatically go looking for the evidence to why things aren't working out, why things shouldn't work out. And yet I didn't know that listening to that was optional. Nobody ever told me that you do not get paid by the thought. You do not have to act on everything you hear. That most of what you're hearing is a lie. Your brain's lying to you. And so of course, love would seem obscured from our lives if in our heads there's just a lot of interference. And I'm not talking about loving thoughts and changing to loving thoughts and having more positive thoughts. I'm just talking about, wow, there's a freedom of mind available that is free from the narrative of judgment and analyzing and trying to figure out and wondering, and should I, shouldn't I, and am I doing the right thing? Am I in the right place? Am I with the right man? Am I with the right woman? Am I questioning? There's a place beyond that narrative that is just a deep knowing and wisdom, and comes with a flavor and feeling of love that we can trust.
And that is always there, just behind that noise. And that is life. That is actually life. That is love. That is the only thing that is eternal. That energy, that feeling of all of that is life. And it's the thing that's eternal. The chatter part is not. That part is there for as long as it's interesting to you. For as long as it's interesting to you, that engagement in that chatter, that problem solving, that issue that's in the way, that's more important than your life, for as long as that's interesting, then that comes into the front, obscuring what's really there, which is, you are alive. You are alive right now. And when you consider eternity, this being alive right now for maybe 100 years is less than the blink of an eye. And to be totally present to that is you would be full of inspiration and that kind of a feeling. Grace, should we open it up? Yeah, do you want to open it up? There's Lynn had posted a question, and we could.
Yeah, I'd love to open it up.
Yeah.
Just a warning, I do one of my dogs has just
Good.
come in to join us. So yeah, let's open it up. I would love to hear some questions.
That's either your dog or Francesco's involved, but we'll see. Why don't we? He wanted in on this. I think he could tell we were talking about him. But could we, Lynn? Would you mind coming off mute maybe and asking your question, or do you want it read? Hey,
yeah,
Lynn.
sure. I can read it out. Hi, Grace.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah. So, Mike, you probably already answered this because right after I typed it, you were kind of like going there anyway. So, what I wrote was, do you think that you felt and experienced this as a result of the deep feeling of loss after losing Francesco? Or did you feel the same level of love beforehand?
Yeah, I had felt this level of love a number of times, Lynn. This falling back in love a number of times. So I don't associate it with the loss. What I will say is I was quite, I mean, it was huge. I didn't expect to feel that depth of love and have it carry me for quite a number of weeks. So I would say it was on an even deeper level then. But I had been experiencing falling back in love for the last number of years as I became less interested in the narrative in my head.
Mm. Great.
Thanks, Lynn. Thank you. And so there's Joe and then also David. So why don't you go, Joe, and then...
Hi, Dominic. Hey, Grace.
Hey.
Yeah, the question I wanted to ask is, what's your interpretation between the difference between personal love and universal love, but also how it applies to the self? So that when people say that you must learn to love yourself first or write down things that are great about yourself, how that's different to actual universal love for yourself.
Is there one of us you want to start the answer with? Do you want to go with that, Dominic? And then I can chip in? Or
yeah. The part that I'll say about that is, so, and this goes to, you know, if you've been on any of my other webinars, that question really goes to who are you really? Because when you start to say about a universal love and a personal love, and then a love of self-love, right? That is the question of who are you? And if you listen in other webinars, that who you really are is pure source energy consciousness. You are the aliveness that animates your body. You are that energy that is breathing you right now. Right? And once you see that who you are is this non-physical energy expressed into a finite physical you with a name and all of that. But when you see it's that energy, then that energy is inseparable. You can't separate energy, right? It's energy is energy. It's just all. So universal love is a name often given to that energy of all that is. Sydney Banks, those of you familiar with three principles, he spoke about the energy of all things. And he said, and who you are is a microscopic aspect of that energy. So really, there is only that energy, that love, right? And then most people, when you're talking about personal love, you say, well, I love my wife and I love my children. And what that does is it takes something which is the all, which is who you are, and gives you an opportunity to express and experience what that is. But the only way you can express and experience that and feel that is through a finite perspective. So now that gets to the you that you know, that is your identity. And that you can love another, right? Until you can see your love, and that's kind of cool, but we might say, well, you know, what's that like? What's that like? How you know what it's like is when you take that energy of all that you are and you begin to express to another, or to that homeless person, or to someone you don't know. What is that like to express that? How will you express it? And as you express that universal energy, you experience it personally. So your experience is personal. Grace, if there.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Joe, the universal love sounds more connected to what we were sharing here earlier, you know, our eternal nature. It would seem to me that personal love comes with a certain amount of condition, and universal love seems to me to be more a reflection of that eternal nature. I don't know about self-love, because I think that's the one thing that, you know, we all, well, maybe I'll just speak for myself. Yeah. I mean, I could be writing lists for the next 10 years trying to get to the point of self-love. I think that's something that has become a bit of a concept when you just get familiar with the feeling of love. You know, I think as we get familiar with the feeling of love, it doesn't really matter where it comes from, or whether or not we've written lists about it, or whether or not we're getting it right. It's just letting go of everything that doesn't feel like love and becoming intolerant, if you like, intolerant to anything but love. But it's a feeling that fuels us. It's a feeling that's rich. It's a feeling that has carried me through my grief in particular. And it's just not dependent on us being in any certain state of mind or mood. It's much bigger than us.
Mm.
And I think the more we are coming from there, which of course, without resistance, it's just who we naturally are, the more we're coming from there, the more our lives work, the better the decisions we make. In my own case, I stopped leaving the man I loved. My relationship got deeper and richer. And my God, thank God, I didn't know our time was this limited.
Thanks, Grace. You know, the only other thing too, based on how you said, that there's no way to the love of all things by disparaging yourself. So oftentimes in the spiritual communities, there's a denigration of you, the personal you, the personal love. And if there is not a self-love for who you are, meaning the ego, the identity that is you, if you cannot appreciate that aspect of who you are, you cannot appreciate all that you are. You cannot access universal love by disparaging, dismissing, disconnecting from any aspect of itself. So this you that is personal is the beginning state of love. If you cannot have love for this you, because let me tell you that, you know, God or universal loves to be you, loves to be you, no matter what problems you may have being you. God loves being you, loves living your life as you. And so at closer you get to self-love, the more you will know how you are seen in the eyes of God or the universe, whatever language you want to use. So there is quite a connection between universal and personal love in that way. And it does begin there, because you can never reach universal from any sort of disconnecting from the most intimate part of you. David? Oh, sorry, I'll unmute you, or you unmute.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So last Wednesday, I got a phone call and I found out that the house I've been living in for nearly 9 years is going to be sold. I've been renting it. And I just went into shock. It's kind of like a loss. It felt like I've just been told that somebody had died, like that I was close to. And it was, I don't know, how can I say? I didn't feel great, but what I did do is I kept up my routines, walking, breathing, and so on. And bit by bit, I started sharing, what was going on for me with my, friends and neighbors, and who have been very supportive. So it's not, this is not a situation I can buy myself out of. It's how can I say, finely tuned, given COVID circumstances, the economy, and so on and so on. There's a whole lot of considerations. Anyway, I'm just I have some kind of faith, that I'm going to land, but I just don't know where I'm going to land, And interestingly, my cat, who really adopted me at the shelter, some 6 or 7 years ago, is now just coming here to eat mostly, and then going, I think, to my neighbor next door. And I've often thought, that maybe his name is Skylar, is an animal reincarnation, if you like, of a former partner of mine, Carlos. And so I often thought that anyway, because he's feisty, and argumentative and tantrumy and all the things that Carlos was, occasionally. Yeah. So I'm kind of emptied out now about what I was going to say, but I think there's some gold in there somewhere, and maybe, one of you or both of you could, how can I say, point to the gold. One clue that I do have is that, out of all the discussion today, is that Sydney Banks says that love is always the answer, and this discussion today has deepened that for me. To me, it's gone from beyond like just a concept that I would, say love is always the answer, to something, more embodied, and that's quite nice.
Mm.
David, can I ask you, how do you know it's gone to something more embodied than a concept?
Because I'm speaking it and I'm feeling energy in my body moving all around. That is that there's multiple things going on right now, but there's a kind of core sensation, like of maybe like a life source energy as I'm speaking. I can feel it in my hands, in my legs, and I'm feeling a little sad, but it's like I'm more like looking at the sadness rather than being controlled by it. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's beautiful. I want you to I hope you get to hear the recording. I want you just to hear that, there is a little bit of hope and space right there. You said, I'm looking at the sadness rather than, what I hear in you is you're not completely caught up by this situation. And this is the beautiful thing about having even a little bit of distance from the narrative in your head. You begin to see, oh, okay, change is going to occur and sadness is optional. Anxiety is optional. And let me just talk a little bit deeper about that in the hope that it helps. What I mean by that is that we can use our thinking to scare ourselves. And feelings of anxiety, feelings of fear about the future, feelings of worry are just beautiful alarm bells from the body to tell us you're using your thinking in an unhelpful way right now. Now, I didn't know that for many years. So I would get a feeling of, oh my God, I need to move house. I need to change. There's no money. There's no this. There's no that. And I would go on this train of worry. And then I'd have all these feelings of sadness and stress and anxiety. And I'd stop sleeping at night. And I'd have really huge reactions and think that they meant something about my future. Not realizing that they were just a beautiful set of alarm bells. Anxiety, depression, stress, worry, fear, beautiful alarm bells saying, hey, Grace, the way you're using thought right now can't be trusted. So at one point it occurred to me, worry is optional. Suffering is optional. Maybe I'll just hang out here in the unknown and see what wisdom, what love brings me to do next. Because when I'm not scaring myself, I'm really, really, really good at knowing what to do. And you're exactly the same, David. I don't know if you heard anything in that, but I just felt it was important to share.
Thank you, Grace. I heard a lot in that, and what I'd like to share with you is that whilst I don't have a precise future in mind, I've had some, should we say, strong thoughts. I'm going to call them thoughts. That I'm using as portals to explore. Is there something there, or is it just like a thought? What I mean by that is I live in Northern California. I've lived here I've lived in California a long time. I thought, well, maybe I should go to the East Coast, Florida, maybe I should go, to, Seattle, or, I've had all these thoughts and, so I've been sort of exploring those, and seeing if there's any kind of energy in them, or if they're just, thoughts, just kind of like thrashing around, Ultimately, I think the universe is saying to me, that you really do know what you want, and we're giving you a little kick up the butt, to get you into action. It's something like it's having lived in this beautiful cocoon for nearly 9 years, that I would be quite happy to keep going. That the universe has other ideas for me, and I do hope that what I'm sharing is in some way helpful to others. That you're getting something out of this, for yourselves, because that's what matters to me.
Thank you, David. Yeah, thank you. That's it. And Sid said follow the feeling, so you can feel the different thoughts. And so as you feel a thought that says go to the East Coast, or you feel a thought that says do this or that, just follow the feeling. And wisdom is in a nicer feeling, in a better feeling. Wisdom is in a better feeling. That is wisdom. Wisdom is never frightening you, scaring you, worrying you, making you anxious. So whatever thoughts are taking you in that path, that's not wisdom. That's mind chatter. So that's a wonderful guidance. Grace, we have one more, Andrea, and then I think that's how we should go. So Andrea, thanks for participating.
Hi, thank you for taking my share and my question. I was going to say, I really love how this applies to and extends into all areas of our life. I'm just sort of now realizing as I'm listening, you know, I don't know why, but I've never ever worried about money or finances. And when I look back, I actually have no idea how I've managed. And it's just something that I've never put any energy into other than, you know, working a job and being financially responsible for my bills. But it's always just come so easy for me. And even a couple of years ago, I took a big pay cut. I moved to a different job and I thought, oh, I'm going to probably have to sell my house and my car. And, you know, here I am a couple of years, 3 years later, and nothing has really changed in my quality of life. And I still wonder, how is that possible? So there's that part. And then applying to my relationships, you know, I never really had a good relationship with my dad, and it was very strained, and I never felt love from him. I never felt outwardly loving him back. And in the last maybe year, I don't know what happened, but I see him in a different way. And everything that you talked about, Grace, were things like judgment, etc. Somehow that fell away from me. And we have this unbelievable relationship now. Like, I'm 50 years old and I have never had a relationship with him. You know, he calls me, like, it's just crazy. So I'm really connecting on, like, my brain is just firing on all these levels listening to this. And it leads to my question. I also lost a stepson several years ago. And Grace, when you talked about that you feel the connection, like there's a feeling where you just know that that person is communicating or with you. I have that with my stepson, and I dream about him a lot, and I experience the same kinds of things that you describe. And this leads to my question. I lost somebody really important in my life over 25 years ago, and I've never been able to feel that feeling around that person. And I try to, and I want to, and I lie in bed and I try to conjure this person in my dream, and I just can't seem to. And I just wondered if you had any ideas on when there's that much time, like it's over 25 years since I lost this person. And I just wondered if you think that it's possible to still find that connection and feel that feeling again.
Every relationship is eternal. Grace, anything you wanted to say?
Well, I'm just going on what's coming to me. I'm certainly not an expert in communicating with people that have passed, but what's coming to me is time really is irrelevant. And what I notice for me, Andrea, is when I'm efforting to connect with Francesco, I can feel that efforting, and it doesn't really manifest as naturally as when I'm just available. I almost put it this way: let your friend drop in rather than you go searching for the connection with your friend. That's what's coming to me. Just let your friend drop in. The fact that you are interested in that connection, the fact that you would love to have that connection, you don't need to work so hard. You know, that friend, that relationship is eternal. And now, just like the relationship with your father turned a corner in an instant after X number of years of not having that, your relationship with your friend is about to turn a corner too. just don't work at it so hard.
Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah,
Thank you so
perfect.
much.
And Andrea, I'll just add that the path of that is effortless, has less resistance. That's why the don't work too hard, less resistance. And if you imagine what has happened in the relationship with your father, who's around and in physical form and resistant, because, you know, we all have our own things, right? And yet look at the relationship that has flourished out of that. You can imagine what it would be like with a friend who no longer has any resistance. And the other thing that I would throw in here is what Abraham says. The fact that you are thinking about this friend, how do you know they weren't thinking about you, which is the only reason it's even coming to mind for you? So Abraham will often say that with non-physical. They say, I was just thinking about my dad. And Abraham will say, are you sure? because it could be your dad was thinking about you. And that's where that connection, it occurs to you like you're thinking about your dad. So you're already making connection. The fact that the one is you're remembering and two is you're desiring it. Nothing can get in your way from that side. The only resistance is in your side. And that resistance is belief. This isn't normal. This is not something I could do. It's probably been too long. All of those stories are only on your side. There's none of those stories on the other. No resistance. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.
Awesome. Grace, maybe I know Joy has her hand up, but maybe we can just close in case people have to go. And then if you have a minute to stay or whatever, if anyone wants to stay, then we can kind of take.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, let's do that.
Awesome. Well, so Grace and I, as we've been preparing for this, we have never done any work together. And so as we started to prepare for this and doing this, we've been thinking about what else we can provide. And so we're looking at creating a workshop that we've already put together and it's not put together, but we've got the basic idea, which is a deeper exploration into this. And so it'll be 2 days on May 6th and 7th, which is really, it's 3 hours on each day. There'll be a break in between, and that's on a Thursday and a Friday. Grace, maybe some more you want to say? I'm going to put a link and stuff.
Thank you. Well, it's a bit like taking this from theory to the embodiment of the experience. And I think that a deep dive via this workshop is really what's on offer around falling back in love. So if you feel called to explore more deeply this subject of falling back in love, whether it's in relation to a person in your life or a job, maybe it's in relation to yourself, maybe it's in relation to your body, what we're really pointing to is an end to living resistant and breaking free of those thoughts of worry and those habits of dissatisfaction and judgment. So we'd like to take the conversation deeper on those 2 days. And if you're feeling called towards experiencing more of that and more of us and more of this grounding, go right ahead. Dominic has the link there. And I think you have something special.
Well, Grace,
right?
Grace, today, while we were talking about it, my birthday is on Sunday, which is April 18th. So what we decided was if this resonates with you and you do decide you want to register for the workshop, up until Sunday on my birthday, you will also have one private coaching session with either Grace or myself. You can pick, and then that'll be part of this as well. So it would be wonderful to see some of you there. And
I'll get the
I put
link, right, Dominic?
Sorry, let me try it again. I didn't put the link in. It went to a different. There's the link.
Yay.
When
That's lovely.
you will also receive a follow-up email to let you know that the replay has been posted, so you can watch the replay, and then I'll just put details, including a link for that workshop in the details there.
Yeah. Was there another question
So
from
Joy,
someone?
yes. Joy, if you're able to ask your question, that'd be great.
Well, I just wanted to thank everyone, Dominic and Grace, for today. It's just been really beautiful. And I just wanted to say that, Grace, everything that you're saying is just so wonderful. My partner died about 9 years ago, and it was like the thing that, as I was going through it, and she had taken her own life, and so there was like that whole added to it. But in the midst of it, I was always aware of what a gift it was at the same time, because it's like my heart broke open. I was the type of person who could keep my feelings and my emotions pretty much in check and have a lot of, I could logic my way through my feelings, but not that. Not that. And so it like totally broke my heart open. And, and I was always aware, like, there's so much possibility here. There's, like, be aware. There's so much to learn from this and to open to life and love. And so I just love that you're out here sharing your experience with people. And I've been working with people with around grief and loss lately as a coach. And, to me, the biggest thing is that there can be grief without suffering, which is what you're talking about, of not listening to and believing the thoughts and all the should-haves and could-haves and would-haves and if onlys and, all of that. So thank you.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you're so welcome. Such good work to be doing in the world too. Yeah. Thank you, Joy.
Yeah. Thanks, Joy. Thanks for that. And isn't grace a gift? To be, I through the weeks that we were kind of going through and having these conversations, I just was so present to the fact of what a gift this was because of how Grace is, her ability to discern and see and be able to be so articulate in the sharing of this. I'd never experienced anything like that. And so just opened up a whole other world of possibility. Yeah. Wonderful. And thank you. I see some notes in there, and Robin, thank you for your sharing in there. We're going to get the chat downloaded too, so we'll be able to read all that. Appreciate your notes in there. Thank you very much. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Hope to see some of you at our 2 days in the beginning of May. That would be wonderful. And some of you in the private coaching conversations. Very good. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.